happening? Why are we back at this turmoil?
It goes back to how ECOWAS addresses coup d'etat in the past. And they need to use force.
Yeah, this force thing is frightening. Is
Yes.
it going to, if it doesn't work, then ECOWAS is in trouble.
No, ECOWAS understands its strengths and its limitations, and they're trying to work within that space to make sure they address the situation. But for the first time, we've seen some of the most stringent measures being imposed. But when we get there, you begin to see the measures.
So you tell us a story your way.
So before we get to the story itself, when the coup occurred in Mali, there was this senior political analyst, a lecturer at the University of Cincinnati. He made an analysis of how international community responds to coup d'etat, and he categorized it into four. You have the hard rejection, where the coup makers are pressured to stand down immediately and restore the ousted incumbent. That is what ECOWAS is trying to do here. You have the soft rejection. The ousting of the incumbent is allowed to stand, but the coup makers are not permitted to rule.
Is it that they're not permitted to rule, or they are given a short time to hand over?
In the soft rejection, the ousting is allowed to stand, but they're not permitted to. So you be called for a fresh election.
Yes, fresh election. Yes. That's true. That's very true.
And there's soft acceptance. Ousting the incumbent is allowed to stand, and the coup makers are given relatively lengthy period of time to organize transition, which has been ECOWAS' approach previously.
Lengthy time of time means 2 years, 1 year,
2 years, a number of years,
or sometimes 2. Then they extend it to another one.
So that approach was not allowed. In Mali, you had 2 coups by the same actor, Assimi Goïta. And then you have the hard acceptance. The coup itself is treated as fait accompli, and the coup makers are allowed to stand, which is the same reason that we have the situation in Sudan today. AU allowed that to stand.
Sudan itself?
Yeah, because
the insurrection that overthrew al-Bashir?
Al-Bashir, the military intervened.
Yeah.
The civilians stood their ground. That was the first time I saw people besieging the army headquarters in the world.
That they don't want al-Bashir?
They don't want the military to take over from al-Bashir.
They want al-Bashir to be there.
Instead of AU supporting the citizens, AU went to negotiate the power sharing with the army that allowed the army to have a say.
Oh, I see. What was AU's basis for doing that? American pressure? Because al-Bashir has sanctions on his head, doesn't he?
Perhaps there was this
fear of international criminal courts summons.
There could be this fear of instability if you take the army out of politics too hasty.
Yeah, so there must be a reason. It's not that they were being biased, but there's a reason.
No, but you see, sometimes when you don't crack the whip, in the 96, 97, we had wars in Sierra Leone, Liberia. It took hard intervention to prevent the spread of the same situation. So meaning if you don't crack the whip, you create a domino effect.
But the intervention in Liberia was not successful.
It was. I don't know, we wished Chastela out.
No, the intervention that brought Chastela in, is that where ECOMOG?
ECOMOG was in Liberia twice.
Yeah, twice, yes. The first ECOMOG was to stop Chastela from taking over.
Yeah.
And that's what got Samuel Doe killed by Yomi Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ECOWAS was not successful because they went in to support the regime, the existing government, which was Samuel Doe. He got murdered by another rebel leader, and they really couldn't succeed. So
now, if you look at the situation today, we have the key actors on the ground now. Having ousted the president, you have ECOWAS taking the lead initiative. So on one side, you have ECOWAS under its chairman, Bola Tinubu, and then you have Mohamed Bazoum, the also president, and then his former boss, Mohamed Yusuf. This was also an important factor in this coup. And then you have the coup plotter himself, General Abdurrahman Tijani. In 2021, barely 2 days before the handover, the first transition of power from one government to another in Niger, from Mohamed Yusuf to his then subordinate, there was this coup attempt that was foiled by General, what do you call it?
Foiled by him?
By him in 2021. So afterwards, he gained the loyalty and trust of the president. But then the coup itself looked more like an opportunistic coup. Initially, I thought it was this France trying to, because there were instances where, in series of his interviews, he was sitting towards, more closer to Nigeria, supporting ECO and trying to realign the relationship between Niger and France. And ruling the French country is equally more difficult. Because on one side, you have to be a puppet of France to stay in power, or else they plot coup against you. And the citizens always know very well that that arrangement doesn't work and continue to entrench their poverty. And then we also try to break away from that arrangement. You could stand to face a coup d'etat. So you are caught in between a rock and a hard place. Listen to the wish of the people, break away from France, and lose your power. So in a series of interviews, he was speaking in Hausa, though. That's why I didn't even bring the videos. He was showing his support for ECO, trying to see if Niger could start putting their money, taking them from the CFA. You get the issue. So that's why initially I thought it was a pro-French coup, but when you begin to connect the dots, you realize that it was just an opportunistic coup. He thought since Bazoum was using anti-French rhetorics, if he overthrew Bazoum, he could gain support of France.
Oh, I see. So he was being clever.
He was being clever.
Has that happened? Has he gained the support of France?
No. Because in this situation, he failed to read the context.
So France is against the coup?
France is against the coup. And moreover, you see, France wants stability in Niger. You know, after their ouster from, what do you call it, Burkina Faso, they deployed their forces to Niger. So Niger is very pivot. It's a pivotal.
Okay, they have a battalion there. They have a base.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have base across the Sahel. But when the Burkinabe government asked them to leave, they had to send the forces to Niger. So Niger is pivotal to security and the fight against terrorism in the Sahel. When we get there, you see the map over there. So, so these are the actors.
Okay.
And you know, this is also a big test for not just ECOWAS, but for Tinubu.
As an individual? Or as a president of Nigeria?
As a president and an individual.
As an individual, why?
You know, when he took over the reign of ECOWAS, he gave a very strong worded statement, categorically. And these are part of it. We must stand firm on democracy. There is no governance, freedom, or rule of law without democracy. We will not accept coup after coup in West Africa again. Democracy is very difficult to manage, but it is the best form of government. So this is big.
Oh, I see.
And this
so this is a test for him.
This is the biggest litmus test. And that is why if you look at ECOWAS posture today, you begin to see the traces of this.
Oh, I get you. Beautiful analysis, Bello. So the poster of ECOWAS, which is frontal, is coming from
Tinubu. And secondly, it has to do with Nigeria's own security concern. Nigeria have about 1,000 kilometer border with Niger. And that long. And Niger equally shares border with, what do you call it? So before we go to that, so let's look at the process. So they're now using diplomacy, doing that with the reservation of the use of force. So initially they sent Patrick Talon, the Benin president, to speak to the coup plotters
in
Niger. Then they later sent Mahamat Idris Deby Itno. One would question, why are you sending a soldier who equally came to patrol on constitutional means?
This man here?
Yeah, this man here.
Chadian president?
Yeah, the son of Idris Deby.
Okay.
Per their constitution, in absence of the president, the Speaker of the National Assembly takes over. When his father was killed fighting the rebels, the military installed him in office, which itself is unconstitutional. But then Chad is not a West African country. Chad is in Central Africa. So ECOWAS sending Mahamat Idris Deby Itno is because they know if they are to enforce their decision, they must have the cooperation of Chad to seal the border.
Yeah, that's correct. But that's good thinking from ECOWAS.
So that's why I say ECOWAS understands its strength and its weakness in this situation.
Explain to us here.
You know, you see here, they met every actor. And because he was just the commander of the presidential guard, for the coup to be solidified, you know, when he revolted, and there was this attempt to restore. So the army promised that they are going to besiege him, as it happened in Burkina Faso during the time of Dindiri. When Dindiri made the move, Gilbert Dindiri, you know,
after Blaise left?
When Compaoré was ousted, there was an interim government. There was this counter coup by the RSP.
Yes.
And then the larger army went to besiege them and they were forced to hand over.
Yes.
People thought that was so, but it took the support. When the larger army got to the capital, it took the support of these two actors, General Salif Modi and General Abu Sidiku Issa, who is the chief of the army staff, to give him the backing of the larger army.
Oh, I see.
He was just the head of a smaller, the presidential guard unit.
Yes.
So it took the support of these two actors
to get the larger army to back him. Because they don't know him directly, because they don't work with him directly. I get it.
So now, and that was how come ECOWAS has to talk with Salif Modi.
Oh, I see.
So he's trying to bring every actor on board.
Okay.
You could see Salif Modi, you could see the coup plotter himself, Abdurrahman Tijani, and you could see the former president. One of the problems that Bazoum had is that
people... And who is leading these negotiations?
This is Mahamat Idris Deby.
He's in Niger. Yeah. And he's meeting all these actors.
Yeah, even though it's from a Central African country, but it's going there as an ECOWAS envoy.
Okay.
But interestingly, there's another contrast here. If you look at the picture of Bazoum here and the pictures of Kondi when he was arrested, you could see that Bazoum is being treated fairly and more dignified, with more
the former president.
With dignity than in the case of Kondi. Okay. It is because the army itself is trying to use Bazoum as a bargaining chip
to stay in power,
to see if they could find ECOWAS use a soft approach, which we started with.
No, that's interesting, but that will go against Bazoum.
That will go against Bazoum.
Because he was not going to be president anymore.
See, they are trying to buy time so that we have the situation of Mali where you oust the government and then we take soft acceptance. So we are giving us a number of time.
Okay, you go on. I'll ask you how do you think it will turn out?
And so this is the ECOWAS communique.
Okay.
One, they still recognize Bazoum as a president, specifically because if they want to intervene in the country, you must cease to recognize the current status quo. But if you admit that Bazoum has been ousted, then there's no ground for you to intervene.
Oh, I get it.
That is why they still maintain that Bazoum remains the president as far as they are concerned.
Wow.
And then they condemn in strongest terms. But then going forward, and they said they wouldn't recognize any decree or whatever that does not come from the elected president.
Okay.
But then there's this place where I think, particular one, where there was a no-fly zone on both commercial and military aircraft.
Declared?
Declared.
By ECOWAS?
By ECOWAS.
Nobody should fly in Niger?
No-fly zone for all commercial.
How are they going to enforce that?
And that is where you need to look at the international actors in Niger. You have the French and you have the US.
Wagner?
No.
No Wagner?
The US has the largest drone base in Africa in the fight against terrorism group in the side situated in Niger.
Mm-hmm. But there's no Wagner there. That's the question I'm asking you.
No, there's no Wagner in, what do you call it?
In Niger.
In Niger at the moment. Okay. And then there's no room for Wagner to operate in Niger at the moment because the status quo does not favor Wagner operation.
Okay, continue. Walk us through these pictures.
Okay, I'm looking.
There's the end of the.
So it frees all transactions, including utility service. Nigeria supply a lot of electricity to Niger. So all commercial and financial transactions between ECOWAS members and Niger.
Oh, so that's what you were telling me, Mikhail, that the guy says, yeah, there's a guy who's in Niger who was going to talk to us. Yeah.
Suspension of all Niger first. So it's like a very similar, more than what we've seen in the past.
These are sanctions.
Sanctions on Niger.
So they should stay in light of?
So they are trying to make sure to prove to the military that you cannot rule this country once we say you can't.
Okay.
And then, but the biggest challenge of ECOWAS, so that's why after every coup d'etat, I see people supporting the coup d'etat is because ECOWAS has a problem. Mm-hmm. There's a selective approach to treatment of coup. The protocol says unconstitutional change of government. It did not state military coup. Mm-hmm. But when leaders try to bastardize the constitution to extend their rule, ECOWAS tend to tolerate it. Mm-hmm. That's why for me, I still consider Alassane Ouattara to be a coup plotter flat.
He's how many? He's in his third term.
Yeah, in the third term. Regardless of the technicality used, ECOWAS says unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional.
But is it unconstitutional? Don't they amend the constitution to secure the third term?
The same protocol says 6 months prior to election, you don't tamper with electoral laws.
Is it electoral laws?
Electoral laws.
Yeah, but they will have to change that. Maybe they amended it.
But then he chose because his own...
what I'm saying is that it's not illegal, but you can complain that it's immoral. Because they will amend the constitution to allow for the constitution to allow what they want to do.
Before you sign to a convention, you must make sure your laws conform with it or you don't sign.
Which convention is that?
The ECOWAS Convention on Good Governance. So once you append your signature, you forfeit whatever clause in your constitution that contradicts it.
No. The National Constitution of Ghana is the most important law. That's the law that we obey. We don't. It's stronger than international conventions.
For example, the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? Mm-hmm. Before you sign to it, if you have nuclear weapon in your constitution, do you sign the NPT? You don't. Mm-hmm. Once you go and sign the NPT, you are forced to destroy your nuclear weapons you have.
Yes, to destroy.
And that is South Africa is the only country to have built successfully and destroyed nuclear weapon.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But that's destroying something. It's not the law.
Once you append your signature to a convention, it's equally binding on you.
And the convention is good governance.
It deals with good governance.
But why is a third term bad governance?
So, because you want to come to it and you change the election. So after you having served your third term and go home, if another person wants to come for a fourth term, should he also massage? So we keep on changing the terms.
No, I'm asking, why is it bad governance?
The constitution says 2 terms,
yeah,
right?
But Mugabe was there for longer than 2 terms.
In Mugabe's case,
Tony Blair was prime minister for more than 2 terms.
Because that is
Margaret Thatcher was prime minister for more than 2 terms.
That is the parliamentary system.
Yes.
And then the government comes from parliament. And moreover, you don't elect the prime minister. You elect the party, and the leader of the party becomes the leader. So anytime there's a change within the leadership of the party, the prime minister could come from the party today, tomorrow lose office. Mm-hmm. But in this case, you are electing an individual. So there are 2 different situations. Yeah. That is one.
I agree with that.
But then you see, because ECOWAS has been very selective through the way it treats the so-called constitutional coup, it kind of gives the military coup plotters some leverage when they try to use populist rhetorics. And you've seen it across, because if you look at the attacks across the Sahel today, despite the fact that the military have taken over, the attacks have intensified. Burkina Faso and Mali. So you consider even the fact that we have military men in power, they are not effective tackling the situation that they promised to tackle. But because they use populist rhetorics, anti-French rhetorics, anti-colonial rhetorics, they begin to gain support. Or because ECOWAS has in one way or other been culpable or conniving with bad governance.